Hey everyone, welcome back to Islander Robotics and another episode of How to Understand Machine Learning. Today we're going to be trying a little bit of a different kind of style, one that's more laid back, as well as a lot of you will be able to kind of see my thinking behind the code that I'm planning on doing, which is I'm planning on making a fully automated data preprocessing class. Alright, so sit back, relax with your favorite snack, and let's get started, shall we? Alright, so I got this file up on the screen. This is the file that we're going to use to make the class. I called it data preprocessing.py, and then I'm just going to make a class. And we're just going to say data pre. Alright? And then, bing, bada, boom. And then what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to put all of you in high speed. Well, I'm going to put myself into high speed and get all this code that I need to get down on the screen, down on to the computer, and then I'll explain it all to you when it actually works properly. The camera kind of died midway through, so I finished up the code, and I'm going to explain to all of you real quick how this code actually works. So, the very first thing is we're going to have all of the self stuff that we need to define before the code actually starts, and that is download, folder, final URL, path, and complete URL. So the final URL is, these are all inputs, so when I actually run the code, when I call this class, it's going to ask me for these actual defined preferences right here. The link for the download, the folder, and then the house URL. So if you remember from the last video, these two actually get combined, and then this variable actually gets pushed into path right here, which I pass in the self.folder. Last video I used two variables. It is perfectly fine to use one variable for this input. I decided that it's going to be a lot simpler for this code to actually be run if I do it this way. Then I combine the final URL and the download to make the complete URL. This is essentially copy and paste from the last week's video. And then here I am in the driver function of this class. To call a function within a class, you have to just say self.data, and since I'm using self here, all I have to pass in is the data right there. Now over in the main, I just say data equals data underscore pre, data.driver, and then calling it, and then I'm just going to run the code really quickly so all of you can see. Website, Command V, copy and paste it. I'm just going to say data, and then data sets underscore housing / housing .tgz. Run it. Oh, what didn't you like? Oh, my Wi-Fi just dropped. Let's run you again. Yeah, that error means that my Wi-Fi dropped, or I typed in the wrong URL. Let's go check. Yeah. Genius. That's supposed to be a slash. So let's call it again. I'll just edit that. I'll edit that out so no one sees that I messed up. Let's do data, and then we're going to say data sets slash housing slash, not dot, housing dot tg. And then over here, housing.csv and all the fun stuff over here. The next step that we're going to do is actually create that HTML file that we ended last week's video. Alright, so I'm going to start that off right about now, and I'll see all of you when I finish up and get that completed. Alright, so I got it up and working. I did the changes I wanted to make, and let me explain to all of you what I did. Alright, so what I did was I made a new function called self.data underscore. I did that because this is data, I didn't want to get confused. And essentially I just did pd.read CSV, and then I passed in the self.csv path variable. Then coming into the actual function that I created was the first I had to ask the user what is the name of this new HTML file that we're going to be creating. And notice that there's no self. I don't want this variable to be remembered after this function is ran, and I'll explain that in a sec. But first half equals input, and what would you like the name of your HTML file to be. Then after that I say self.html underscore name, and this is going to be the function, meaning this is the variable that we're going to save inside of this program as our name for the HTML file. Now I did first half plus .html. Remember, the pandas profiling report only takes in file extension of HTML. Alright, so that's why we did that, and that's why I don't want this to be remembered. And then this and this were explained at the end, and it creates that same HTML file that we had earlier, which is this one right here. The next thing we're going to do is I want a function that spits out exactly what are the name of the columns. Alright, so for this one, if I want, alright, so for instance, I want something that tells me longitude, latitude. It tells me every single name of those columns inside of that data set. So that is actually a Google question. Once I figure all of that out, I'll be glad to explain it to all of you. Alright, and I'm back. So the cool thing about the pandas library is it actually has a function that allows you to call the columns inside of a data set. And surprisingly enough, it's just adding a dot columns to anything that is equal to, let me rephrase that. Since I said self.data equals pd.read CSV, I'm able to then call the same variable and just say self.data.columns. Alright, so what I did here was I said for I in self. After that for loop, I also made another self variable, and this time it is equal to a empty list. Alright, and what I do with this empty list is that essentially I am just taking this empty list and I'm making it bigger, and I'm pushing all of the columns names from self.data into this function right here. So that is what I get right there. And then just so that I can see what is being popped out, I just says print out. I just have those names printed back out. So let's just run this code really quickly, and I'll explain again. So first, this one's gonna get called. All right, actually, the first thing that's going to get called is this download input right here. So this is just a command V, and then the folder we're going to call it to. So this one right here is going to be data. And then what is the end of the URL? Data sets. All right, so when I hit run, that data that we're using down here is getting created. Since this data, the type of data this data is, that's kind of a tongue twister, is a pandas cell array or whatever the heck it's called. I forget what it's called. I'm able to call this columns function right here, okay? And from there, I'm able to also pass in the names inside of the columns by just using this for loop. Keep in mind, this I is not an integer. It is actually a string, and that is why I'm able to say self.columns.append equals I right there. That is not 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 like it is here. It is actually a string. This for loop, since I'm using range, length, the length turns self.columns into an actual number. It turns into the length of the array. Python, they're called lists, but essentially they're called arrays. I'm able to get the length of it through here. Since I have the length, I also can call the range, and then I'm saying that is how I'm passing in each individual name. And let's finish this up by just saying house, so we can get this HTML file all up and going. All right, so it's up on the screen. We got index 0, longitude, latitude, housing. Let's check how correct this is. So let's go into data. Let's bring this up real quick. And then longitude, well, actually it's going to be easier to see like this. Longitude, latitude, housing median. So yes, total rooms, total bedrooms, populations, household. Looks like it is correct. Next thing we're going to do is actually from that HTML file. You can see that we have high correlations. Now the reason why we had to get the columns wasn't just because I wanted to see what the name of the columns are for other data sets. It's also because we're going to be using those as arguments for our high correlation data. All right. So how we're going to be able to filter through that high correlation and get what we want as high correlation, we need some kind of input argument to get passed into that argument. That is why we create that empty list. All right, and then we pass in the names of the columns. So the next thing we got to do is we actually got to start creating that function. And like I said, I'm going to use this book. Link to this book will actually be down in the description bar down below. This is a really good resource to have, and I'll be actually using some code from this book to actually help me with this part of the code. But there's so much more that this book can provide, so I really recommend you getting one, and link down in the description. Alright, I hope all of you enjoy. But anyways, let's get to it, shall we? Also, if you haven't hit like yet, please consider hitting that like button. It really does help me out, and it helps this video get out to more people. So please, if you're enjoying this video and you're finding value out of this video, please consider hitting that like button, and let's get the rest of this code all finished up. Alright, so remember how I said I want my program to tell me which two columns have high correlations between each other, like 0.68 or negative 0.92? Well, I can't really figure that out. I'm going to have to do some research into that. And if you have any idea how to actually do that, leave it down in the comment section down below. I'll be more than willing to try it out, and I'll let all of you know in the next video on how it went. So if you want to know how I ended up solving this problem, please consider that subscription button as well as that bell icon so you get notified when I post my video on how to actually figure this out. And then we're going to continue on creating a automated data preprocessing class for ourselves. So I'll see y'all next video. Happy coding. Bye.